let me talk about a piano concerto which is not unknown, yet appears to be a wallflower or slow seller with pianists and orchestras. For the sake of curiosity of the audience, let me reveal the composer later. I have to admit that in my years as a student, and even later, I agreed with the common negative reputation of this concerto myself. Perhaps mainly because I only heard this work occasionally and it did not appeal to me to study it. Frankly, I consider this concerto not being on the level of the very exciting, ever popular crowd pleasers like a Beethoven Fifth Piano Concerto, the Grieg Concerto, the Tchaikovsky Concerto number 1, maybe Rachmaninoff number 1 and number 2 and 3, or the Ravel Concerto, and other works performed with regularity in orchestra concerts. The enforced hiatus coming during the coronavirus, when public performances became non-existing, gave me the opportunity to reflect on my repertoire in general and to learn some works on my bucket list, or to explore works which one should know through personal engagement of study. Not necessarily to perform them immediately, but to complement the list of composers which one feels close to, with the potential to play them later in front of an audience. I believe that a first performance, a kind of debut for the musician, is the first step to test the performer's ability and basic comprehension of any work, whether it's a concerto or solo piece. By playing a piece several times, and not subsequently in short time, but over a long time period, the piece will grow on you and will eventually become a friend and your story. And that will take time. Definitely. When you have performed, let's say, a lot of Beethoven's works, you are familiar with his style, his sounds, texture, pianistic writing, and so forth. So it should come much more easier to learn another of his works compared to embarking into the different world of a composer who is new to you. The amount of compositions written for the piano is too large for any pianist to learn. And the number of works written for orchestra and a piano soloist is also beyond the capabilities of one artist to convincingly and successfully perform them with artistic and technical quality. Therefore, young musicians will first have to learn the staple composers and certain pieces of the 400 years of compositions which constitute the must-know repertoire and are typically required in piano competitions. Later, you can focus on composers which you feel aligned to personally and emotionally. In theatre and opera, an actress, actor or singer fall into certain categories called Fach, in which they excel. Likewise, you can't be a jack of all trades in music. When you hear this, can you guess the composer? If you recognize the few measures as a romantic composer, you are absolutely correct. But who is the mystery composer and what type of music is it? Could it be Mendelssohn or even Wagner? Could this be the slow movement of a piano concerto? We know, of course, it is a piano concerto. Just look at the soloist waiting for his part. Let me finally reveal the concerto I had the pleasure to study and more recently perform with an orchestra. The Piano Concerto No. 2 in A major by Franz Liszt. If you know the beginning of the Piano Concerto No. 1 by Liszt, a firework of pianistic virtuosity in the service of musical excitement, you must be surprised by the slow tempo at the start of this concerto, with the chamber music-like transparency of orchestration and the pensive, slightly melancholic character of the clarinet part. This is the lyrical atmosphere which draws the listener into the second piano concerto, composed over several decades with a final version released in 1861, about 12 years following the final version of the first piano concerto. It becomes obvious that Liszt embarks on a very different journey here. Instead of presenting a bold theme in allegro, like we have seen so many times in Mozart and Beethoven concerti, Liszt treats us to a sensitive, almost operatic texture where the piano accompanies the orchestra part, which through various wind instruments narrates the harmonic and melodic starting point for this one movement concerto. I would say that one can only appreciate this concerto knowing the context of Liszt's life and the change of his mission and vision for composing. After the so-called virtuosic period of the 1820s and 30s, when he was the flamboyant piano virtuoso with boundless technical abilities and a knack for writing exciting, brilliant works, he turned to developing a style of thematic transformations from a given motive and harmonic structure. Forebearers of this idea can be seen in the Wanderer Fantasy by Schubert or Liszt's own piano sonata in B minor. No, like he chose for the first piano concerto, he continues with a one-movement architecture, where you find several sections of different characters. But those sections are performed without a break. The overall plan is to write a piece where the melodic and harmonic elements evolve seamlessly. Instead of presenting individual melodies, harmonies, rhythms, and other elements in music to establish different characters of several movements, here the music flows continuously from lyrical to dramatic episodes. And this is unique and makes this piano concerto quite appealing for me now. I am happy to showcase a few spotlights, but due to copyright limitations, I have to be brief. So let's begin with the very opening motive played by the clarinet. Now the oboe takes over for 2 measures, and the clarinet will finish the pensive, introverted, slow thematic material. At this point, the piano part commences with drawn-out arpeggi in the right hand. The previous harmonic material is repeated while the essence of the melody is distributed between the flute and violins and rhythmically stretched double the length. In measure 23, the Neapolitan chord initiates a deviation from the melodic and harmonic turn of this previous measure 6, and the orchestra concludes the opening theme in measure 28. In order to avoid here a kind of doctoral dissertation of this piece, describing and analyzing each phrase, let me lead you on a scavenger hunt of the 3 chromatic descending notes which are unique and represent an important feature throughout the concerto. For example, the top notes of the arpeggiated harmonics in measure 207, which is a solo piano, bridging the previous highly energetic to a slow section. And now we arrive at a beautiful cello solo in D flat major, intoning the opening theme with a slight rhythmical alteration. And again, the piano functions here as an accompaniment. Let's skip ahead to find a very obvious change of character when Liszt uses the opening material for a festive march-like marziale. Here the piano contributes to the fortissimo with jumping octaves. measure 457 on, the pianist, for the first time, has a poetic variant of the first theme, which is imitated by clarinet and violins afterwards. Yes, of course, it wouldn't be a Liszt concerto without some firework. But the second concerto is not meant to be a showcase of technical bravura. Liszt wrote his share of brilliant works, like the Hungarian Rhapsodies, the Paganini Etudes, the first piano concerto, of course, and the Totentanz, and similar works. After his traveling years as a pianistic version of a Paganini, he discovered that there is more to music than writing to impress people with his superior and novel abilities on the piano. Probably by watching his colleagues, Chopin, Schumann, Brahms, Wagner, he wanted to find more substance in his writing. He often wanted to explore the possibilities of a singing tone on the piano, thereby writing as if you heard an aria. The second concerto indeed has such elements, and the very transparency of orchestration and giving the cello and the winds some important lines with piano accompaniment often sounds like chamber music. But let's not forget the dramatic sections. My favorite part starts in measure 73. This rhythmically tight motive and the growling bass line in the piano sounds diabolic and sinister. Liszt had an affinity to religion and, as contrast, to the devil. Maybe being inspired by Paganini, he wanted to imitate. Let's name this material as A. And we move ahead to measure 148, where the orchestra has a longer dramatic section with dominating brass instruments. Let's remember this percussive, impatient character as B. The pianist will join this tumultuous back and forth in measure 181. After a long, slow middle section, we arrive here at an allegro deciso, a resolute episode which combines the A material. Remember the sinister part? Played by the brass with the B character in the low strings. Marked marcatissimo and appassionato, both elements in the original earlier version in minor keys, now appear in D flat major, a jubilant transformation here. The piano again accompanies the substantial sounding orchestra with full chords all over the keyboard. And I wonder whether Tchaikovsky was impressed by this piano writing and used this idea for the opening of his first piano concerto. It is in the same key and exhibits the same majestic gesture. By the way, allow me an advice to piano students. Don't strain your hands here, you can't win against the full blast of the orchestra. And anyway, you are only the accompanist here. Yes, of course, if the opportunity arises. And I look forward to diving into this special concerto even more, to be inside the music rather than in front of it.